Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, and we are obviously a very proud NOAH partner for several years, and I'm super excited to share with you some thoughts on the future of public relations and give you some thoughts and this state of mind. And mainly my goal is obviously that you at least have one idea that you can take home, and tomorrow when you come back to work say, that's a great idea, I can implement it in my PR strategy and directly use it and become successful and generate awareness. And obviously we have also time for some Q&A as this is the last workshop, so stay and feel free to ask all your questions that you might have. Just a little bit information about us, what we are doing. We are the leading PR agency for the digital economy, so we are totally focused on all things digital. We have a team of 25 people, B2B, B2C, and doing PR for a lot of amazing clients. PR, social media, and content marketing is the core of our business. And the clients that we are working for are, for example, in the B2B sector, companies like Partech Ventures, Metro Accelerator, Techstars, LinkedIn, venture capital firms, events, and many brands that you may know also in the B2C sector are companies like Evernote, Tinder, Rakuten, Withings, etc. So there are a lot of experiences, and again, feel free to ask all your questions that you might have. So often when people think about PR, they think obviously also about the money, and Bill Gates has mentioned this wonderful quote and said, if I just had $1, I would spend it in PR. And I can understand him that he is saying this, because PR is obviously something that generates great return on investment. Why? Because it not only, like traditional marketing, generates awareness, it generates also a lot of trust building. And what we see with our clients, that when they do a TV advertising campaign, if they're doing Google AdWords, things like that, the conversion rates are much higher also when the sales team, for example, approaches clients as they, for example, would just spend it on traditional marketing. So another recent study showed also that just 32% trust traditional advertising, so obviously PR is a great trust builder and helps you to generate awareness. And another point that we see, and where PR is extremely important, is for natural link building. So a lot of companies in the digital space spend tons of money for their search engine optimization. They spend a lot on the technical side, etc. But there are also massive opportunities that you can't get from an agency where you just give them money and they optimize your site. So natural link building, getting great backlinks from editorial content is definitely something that is super important. The biggest lack that we see when founders approach us, entrepreneurs come to us, is that they are not really aware what their story are. So storytelling is something where there's really a lack. Sometimes we're sitting together for 1-2 hours, and at the end of the day, nobody understands what they're actually doing. It's not only in the B2B field, it's often also in B2C and other things. So the simple questions, who are you and what is your unique communication point, is something that often missing. But this is something that really makes the difference. It's the difference between being a cup of coffee or being a brand like Starbucks. It's a difference being just a glass of water or Evian. So this is something where what PR is about, what storytelling is about, and to find your unique communication point is really crucial for your business, and it makes PR much more efficient. And this is really something where it is worth to spend time to think about what really is the unique communication point, to don't waste time and money and be clear about that. And often when startups come to us, they think that just being a startup in these days is enough, but everyone is, and especially in the conferences like this, is a startup. Or everyone comes to us and talks about big visions to changing the world, or is raising around their 100, 500,000, 1 million. This is not really storytelling, and this is not really a big story. And of course, if you are the first startup where Ashton Kutcher invests, of course this is a story. If you are the second one, maybe that's also a story, but nowadays there are so many companies getting money from him, that's not a story anymore. So this is not what when I'm talking about storytelling, is what I'm talking about. The problem is that often when startups come to us, they tell us, oh, the Rocket Internet is building a competitor, or there's another firm that started with PR, we have also to do it. But this is not the problem. This is not the real problem what startups have. It is not the competition between startups. The big problem is that nobody gives a shit what you're in the end of the day doing, and that's what PR is about and can help you to do this. And often when we talk about what is your current strategy, what are you doing, it's basically what the most people think PR is sending out press releases. And how does it look like? Is like this, that for example, when you're talking about a TechCrunch editor, they're receiving around 800 emails a day. In Germany, it's between 300 and 400 emails a day. So this is definitely something that doesn't help you and that doesn't bring your PR strategy forward, thinking that PR is about sending out press releases. So you have literally think outside the box, the inbox of the journalist, obviously, and think about more creative ways. And with more creative ways, I'm obviously not mean picking up the phone and call them, because also here you have to be aware. Often, especially in Germany, you have a lot of print media still, so they have production times. If you call them in the afternoon, you disturb them. This will not work. If you're not good in pitching by the phone and can't break down your story in 30 seconds, it's also not good. So obviously, this is also maybe not the best approach. And at the end of the day, if it comes to yourself or it comes to the company, you have literally also to think about how can you be the purple cow, how you can stand out, and how you can really tell a story. And often it starts, especially when younger companies, or also if you're service providers, with more like, for example, personal branding. So building a personal brand is super important, especially if you are not Starbucks or one of the big brands. So it's often very much close to the founder, to the founding story. So this is, for example, one point that is super important. And of course, also here, the positioning and be clear what I stand for, what are the expert for is definitely super important. And if you look at this picture from Steve Jobs, it has reasons why the real superstars are very consistent in the way they're talking, very consistent in the way they're acting, and obviously also very consistent in the way they show up on stage. And a good personal brand definitely adds value to the company for many different reasons. For example, when you look at Jan Beckers here in Berlin, he is maybe not the best one on stage, etc., but he knows how to use his personal brand to attract talent, to position his company as the leader of the company, as a great place to work, as he knows in the war of talent, it's super important to be a great company, a great place to work and attract great talent, because this is crucial for his business. Or if you look at the Samba brothers, the story about the family, the three brothers, is definitely something that is helpful and gives a strong positioning. And it's not about self-promotion. It's often about really being very clear what your target group is and being present in the right target media that you can make business out of it. So it's not about self-promotion, because it's something that people think that is something super important. No, it's about the right target group. And the right target group can maybe, just when you're a B2B company, a very niche magazine, it doesn't have to be the Bild-Zeitung, for example, in Germany. So when you look, for example, at this cover, this is for our international guests, a magazine like the Adweek in the US, so it's the advertising media for Andrew Mason, the founder of Groupon. It was super important to be on the front page, because he knows that with his product, what he sells with Groupon, it's super important to reach out to the marketing decision makers, to people who are in charge of the product, and convince them that they are a great platform to sell their product and do promotion campaigns. So for him, this niche media, which has maybe in Germany a circulation of, let's say, 30,000 roughly, is for him super important, even if he's a multi-billion-dollar company. And when you think about storytelling and think about talking to the press, sometimes a very easy tool can help you get aware, also for pitfalls, that you think, what are really my strengths, what are really my weaknesses, what are the opportunities, what are the threats, to just become your own head clear, and what are maybe also critical questions that could arise. And so with this little tool, you can easily challenge yourself and just answer these 4 questions to be more aware what really your story is, and maybe also pitfalls. So when you think about building your strategy, building up ideas, I recommend, for example, this easy model, that you not only think in the traditional ways, PR, like press releases and the traditional tools, that you also really come not with the thinking, what is my next press release, what is my next story that I want to tell, that you come more up with what is a great idea, and then look, how could it look like in 140 characters at Twitter, for example, how could it look like in a more private environment when we're talking about Facebook, which kind of influencers are relevant for my brand, that you really play this story and this storyline over all channels. And just to give you a little example, also in fintech companies, when you look at TransferWise, for example, they do, for example, also a lot of offline marketing with this kind of campaigns, but as they are very much into transparency, the banking, they created also a campaign where they got more visual in a way that looked then that way, where the founder and the team came up with the idea with this campaign, Nothing to Hide, which obviously is very visual and has an offline component, and they definitely played it over all the channels. Or, for example, a company like Withings, more popular for great products out of Paris, but for local events, for example, here, the Oktoberfest, they came up with the idea to have this kind of picture that they shared on social media and made it very localized version to generate clicks, to generate awareness that the content is shared. Another example, because often we have also B2B companies that say, oh, we have just a boring product, what can we do, etc. There are also a lot of opportunities. For example, you may know Microsoft SharePoint, big program. They have every year a great conference in Anaheim, people with ties, with suits, etc. So very traditional, very conservative. And there's a little startup called Huddle, which is the direct competitor of them. So they thought, okay, we can't compare, we can't do this kind of big conference, we don't have the money. What they have done, they hired a marching band, as you can see here, and march around this conference building, and obviously also inside. Obviously, the police shut it down, but the coverage that they generated out of it was definitively amazing for them, and with just hiring a marching band and putting on, in this case, Huddle t-shirts, etc., that helped them to generate awareness for a very specific B2B product. Or another example, a famous speaker and journalist and author just for a joke tweeted as he jumped out into a plane for this steakhouse, which also does online delivery. He would laugh when he jumps out of the plane having a steak, and obviously they had their media monitoring on file, and as he arrived, of course, they created great content to share, and a representative from this company came and handed him out his steak, and they had great awareness. So it's all about the unique point, the great story, and the point that really sells the story. And a tool what I like to recommend you, what all of you can use, is something that costs you nothing. And what it is news checking. Who of you have heard about news checking? Anybody? Nobody. Okay, one maybe. Okay. That's a really great tool. I can strongly recommend you to use this because when you plan a strategy, usually it's the way that you say, okay, next week we're talking about a new release. The week after, we do something different. And so you plan your press releases, but that's usually not the rhythm how journalist works, right? So they, for example, stand up, checking the news, and then having, for example, an editorial conference, and then stand up and say, okay, we write about this, this, and this. And maybe a press release end up in the spam folder. What news checking does is the following. You check the news, for example, if you are, let's say, a security company, you have some keywords on Google News, for example, Google Alerts, cost you nothing. For example, NSA, email hack, whatever it is, password stolen, etc. And as soon as a bigger story comes up, and you see it maybe in foreign media, not in your home country, but maybe in foreign media, you send out a quote. You position yourself as an expert and say, this is my opinion. This is something that I can contribute to the story. Maybe if you're really good, you have an infographic, you can refer to a study, etc., that you be part of the discussion. And this is super important. I'll give you one concrete example how this could work. In the moment as Apple announced the Apple Watch, we had a client called Applause. It's a B2B company, mobile analytics firm. And in the moment as Apple announced, we bring out the Apple Watch, we sent out a press release and positioned the founder of Applause as the go-to person, as the expert for all things around the Apple Watch. So for example, what are the 5 tips that you should, when you program an app, for example, have to have in mind? What is the strengths, the weaknesses? What have you be aware of when you produce this kind of app? And the outcome was that he was covered in all the major media. Everyone who covered the Apple Watch covered also him as an expert, used his quote that cost him actually, at the end of the nothing. It was just right timing and having a good quote. And every one of you here in this room is expert for something in his field, in his niche, in his industry, and you should use this because it's super efficient. Another example was the Apple Watch also in the B2C field, Evernote. The founder of Evernote, we introduced them to the media as an expert for what will happen when on the Apple Watch it blinks and beeps and messages flow in. Is it maybe unpolite to use an Apple Watch? So he was the expert more for the mainstream media, for the daily press, and he answered all the questions and positioned himself as an expert and positioned himself as the person to talk to when it comes to the Apple Watch. So this is something, a tool that is free, that just costs you a little bit of time to have a great awareness for your keyword, for your industry keywords, and be on time when it comes to the right keywords. And often, when you look at the press and when you're very familiar with what you're doing, it can be really helpful. For example, there is an online insurer in the UK where you can do car insurances online. And they found out from all the data they have in which street are the most car accidents. And what they created out of it was that they've wrapped the whole street in this kind of, and sorry, I don't know the English word, maybe someone can help me. You know what I mean with this air things. We don't need the sound, thank you, we don't need the sound. It's just about, and they've wrapped it, of course, the whole street, and said this is the street in the UK who has the biggest and the most car accidents, and obviously renamed it an accident avenue, and obviously that was very funny. All the press came, they tweeted about, and in the morning people wake up and then saw all the cars wrapped in this video. That is a super cool idea. Obviously, there's always a little bit of money involved, but it's a great idea. And in this case, for this online insurer, it was a great PR campaign and generated a lot of content. And it's all about a target group. And often I'm very curious and I'm wondering that sometimes people just craft one press release, send them out and wondering that nothing has happened, instead of thinking about targeting different target groups. For example, we're working for a company called Victor. This is an app where you can book your private jet. I mean, all of us doing this regularly, I know. But this app is really fantastic, and you can play a lot of stories. You can play, for example, here in a more business-oriented magazine, as it's a new trend, and what are the cost efficiency, the costs that you can save when, for example, you use this app. You can do it more from the mobile perspective and say what it takes that you buy this kind of high-priced premium product via an app. What does it mean? You can also play it in a magazine like Forbes. They're a bit more colorful. They like also stars and celebrity, and talking about that Rihanna, for example, uses Victor and uses more this kind of celebrity approach. So, for example, you have different kind of story for the same topic. It can use it individually for every media, and this is often the secret sauce for success in PR. So, looking into your data, finding out the right stories, it's super important to be successful. And for example, to finish this with Victor, they produced an infographics and said, what are the most routes that people fly? For example, Norway to Turkey is very interesting, Turkey to Belgium, Norway to Italy. What are the typical flights that people who are using private jets flying? This is content marketing. This is something super valuable for journalists, but you can also do it in a just more simple way. And you can imagine that this kind of graphics are not super expensive. Maybe here, if you have a graphic designer, €500 or so, but it makes the article, it is great content for the journalist, because the budgets in the editorial offices go definitively down, so there's not much budget. If you can provide this kind of content, this is definitely super helpful for all the journalists. So when you think about what is really important, sometimes people come to me, entrepreneurs come and say, can you bring us in TechCrunch? Can you bring us to Build.de? This is super often the first question. But what we say is this really a target group? Are you really sure that this is super important for you. And we had the case, for example, with someone who built this app. This is a hotel booking app where you can instantly book a hotel room to a special rate on the same day. I think that's well known as Hotel Tonight. And the founder came to us and said, I think Bild would be great. Bild, for everyone who is not German, is the new daily newspaper with a massive reach, over 12 million readers. And we thought, yes, it's a newspaper with a massive reach, but we don't think that this is the best for you. But he insisted and said, I want in this newspaper. So we had an article in this newspaper, and then he called me and said, PR doesn't work for me, and I have no downloads, and we so let's take some time, let's look into the data, and let's do it our way. So we take a very data-driven approach. We really figured out which kind of media are for the target group super important, and it was not, obviously, what was his gut feeling. It was definitely something else, and it was, in this case, literally called Kleine Zeitung, small newspaper. They had a great travel section, and this little article generated for him 10,000 of downloads. I think it was 30 or 40,000 downloads. And then we continued with this approach, with a very tailored, a very focused approach, and alone the PR generates him 150,000 downloads with this app. So that's why I insist to say, really focus and great storytelling is super important to be, in the end of the day, successful. So when you plan a campaign, it's not only about the coverage. It's not only about the generating awareness. In the end of the day, what we at Piabo think is you have to create engagement. If there's no engagement, like people downloading a white paper, they're clicking on your website, they're buying your product, they're just looking for more information, then of course it is not so valuable. And generating engagement out of PR is something super important, but also something that needs some creativity. So just being in the news is definitely not just what, let's say, brings the money in and helps in the end of the day to bring the results that you deserve. So for example, what can you do? I personally believe every product you can reach the heart and the mind of the people. Also, if you'll be a B2B company, and you have to be creative and think about how you really can give the people a personal, emotional connection. And I give you an example. There's a company out of Munich called Stylight. And as they launched, what they have done is they thought, okay, we're having a great fashion portal, and we are selling this. And I said, okay, but this is something what a lot of other companies are also doing, right? So they said, yeah, but you have a great usability, and so, yeah, but usability, writing in a press release, you have a great usability. I mean, this is no experience. You can write everything, but this is nothing concrete, nothing. So what they have done is they made a cooperation with a German glove manufacturer called Röcke. Very traditional, they have beautiful leather gloves, and obviously it only makes sense to have gloves when you have both of them, right? So what they have done is they take the press release and put one glove in this package, send it out to the journalist, and the journalist used it, and of course won all the second glove. There was a conversion rate from obviously over 90%, because everyone, even in Vogue and all the glamorous style newspaper, won this famous glove. So it was PR for the glove company, PR for the startup, it was a personal, emotional experience, and the best of it, that what they thought is the USP, the usability, they had to use it because otherwise they wouldn't get obviously the other glove. Super successful campaign. It's not about money, just about smart thinking. Another example, there was an app where you could get paid videos. So what we created a campaign on the very famous Potsdamer Platz, created this very emotional picture. So this was a car, we cut it in the half, put it on the Potsdamer Platz, made this kind of emergency band, and created a setting where everyone, of course, shot photos, made videos, shared it. It was a super emotional approach. And this super emotional approach generated 100,000 of downloads globally, because this photo for them was so emotionally. We created a story about an artist and said then and released, okay, this is art. So for example, if we don't care about our environment, things will fall on our heads, etc. So this is a very emotional picture, obviously, and the press obviously laughed it because it's emotional. It is something that really brings value. And now I would like to ask you, what do you think, how much was this whole campaign? What do you think? How much it was? Yes. The whole campaign? The car, the PR, 35,000. More or less? Sorry? 10,000? 5,000? It was exactly 10,000 euro. So the car, the artist, the PR, the permissions. Have you asked for permission? I don't know. This was super successful, and obviously it was much more worth than 10,000 euro. And this is something what you really can do, right? You can just look at the ad equivalence value, and if you're spending PR money, in the end of the day, you should more get back than you pay. It's that easy. And
you need a very good joint to get these ideas.
Sorry, you?
You need good joints to get those ideas.
You need good, great people, creative people, but the combination is important. So there are a lot of agency, they are super creative, but it doesn't help you if you have these pictures, but nobody mentions your brand. But here, if you look in the articles, you always have the brand name Viv in it. And this is the tricky part. Having someone who is super creative and makes a guerrilla campaign and makes a flash mob, blah, 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 super. You find tons of videos on YouTube on it. And always sitting there and smiling and say, that costs a lot of money, but where's the brand? Where's the connection to the brand? Where's the engagement? And this is the tricky part where it comes business and creativity together. And you find, especially here in Berlin, a lot of freelancers and advertising agencies. They are super creative, but they don't think in business terms, right? And this is something what makes this, in the end of the day, valuable, that you really generate an impact on the business and generate content that is shareable content that goes and flows through the net and connects you with the brand. And a super simple tool, what I personally love, is thinking about how can you visualize your story. Because as said, everyone has a great story, but sending out just a plain text is not emotional. And it's all about emotions, it's like in life, also when it comes to your product. And honestly, hiring a photographer costs here in Berlin, let's say 500 euro for half a day, so it's really not a big deal. There are tons of databases that you can use and buy just simply pictures that are emotional. So for example, if you are a fintech company or you are AM, for example, and you monetize a picture, you could use this picture, for example. Or for example, we worked for companies like eBay for renting, and they talked about one day to us that, oh yeah, we have this great Ferraris that you can rent on our platform. We said, okay, let's send the journalist directly the picture. And you see, they wrote 4 lines, but the picture is much bigger, so it's super important. So another example, for example, there's a Facebook for pets here in Germany. And if you look at this, you see this is the article, and this is the emotional picture, so it's equivalent to the size of the article. So also super important to send this picture. If this picture would be not there, it would be not so emotional, it would not generate impact. Another great example is speed dating. I mean, there are tons of dating platforms out there. How you visualize dating, and especially speed dating. So we came up with the idea, man and a woman, a clock, both on their computers. That's great example for visualizing dating and speed dating. And not only we are creative, also others are creative. We brought them in the main use of RTL, the biggest private broadcaster in Germany. And they came up with this nice mouse as a laugh heart, the stopwatch and the laptop. It's a bit outdated model, I think, but obviously they had their own ideas how they could visualize this. But even B2B, because often I get the question, yeah, that is nice and looks nice, but we are a boring B2B company. But for example, if you are a boring security company, you can visualize it. This is a great example. If you send this with your press release and you're a security company, everyone understands what is it. And it costs you nothing to produce this kind of picture, but it explains, it helps making the article bigger. And even with a much more special mobile security, you can do this, and you have there great examples for mobile security, and you can use this and visualize, and you have great outcome. So let's talk just briefly about the future, what we're seeing, what excites us. We're always trying to think ahead. What we see is that right now for journalists, virtual reality is super interesting. So for example, if you have a factory, if you have a travel business, in all kind of businesses, you can use this. Journalists are very interested, especially when you are in countries where there are very decentral media landscape, like in Germany. Nobody flies to look at a nice little startup in Berlin from Munich to Berlin. So you can just easily on Amazon buy a camera for, let's say, 400 euro, make an office tour, for example, in virtual reality, put it on YouTube, send the journalist a branded cardboard for €30, and they can literally walk through your office, to your factory, to your showroom, etc. Using this kind of tools is super important, and right now it's new, so you have always to think also a little bit what maybe stands out and not at the picture as I showed you, where you're one out of, let's say, 5,000 different emails. And if all these things come together, creativity, mobile obviously very important, and great smart ideas. And I thought about the car experience. This could be, for example, also an idea if you read about cars in your insurer or in your car and talking about security. This maybe is something that's, when all comes together, is very exciting for you. So I personally hope that you get something out of it and that you at least take the idea of thinking about the story, thinking about the unique communication point. And I hope I could also motivate you a little bit to consider PR, to make your marketing, your communication much more attractive and efficient. And I'm open for your question. And I say at this point, thank you very much for your attention and all the best for you. Thank you. So, if you're too shy to ask a question, we have, of course, you can also just grab a business card and send me an email. Otherwise, we have also some mics. If you have questions, then, or just scream it in. So, please.
So my question was around how much, for a startup, how much would you spend, marketing spend on PR, your PR?
I mean, it really depends, obviously, what kind of target group you have, how many countries, etc. Is it just PR or is it also social media, content marketing? Usually, I would just very roughly say between 5 and 20,000 per month is a big range, I know, but just to give you a very brief and roughly number is that what I know usually when you look at all of the campaigns that I see is a realistic approach. Obviously, when you just do bread and butter PR in a very small let's say you're a B2B company, you can start more on the lower end. If you're a company that wants to outsource everything, every channel, every Facebook, Twitter, and do the whole bunch of stuff, then maybe more on the higher end. So it really depends. Often there's also a trend that you have kind of performance components that you say, for example, if you have a backlink, then you can I can pay a little bit extra, or these are my 20 super important target media. If you bring me in, there's a little extra fee for that. So there's always or special reach targets that you have. There are always, of course, negotiations, but roughly it's the range that is realistic for a, let's say, high growth startup, and not. Yeah, when you have a, and when you, let's say you have a Series A round or something like that, then this should be what you calculate in. Any further questions? Maybe it's too dark, I can't see. No more questions? So then I'm happy to hand out also some business cards if you are then more like to write in privacy and not ask in the full audience. So thank you very much again that you was here and really appreciated your interest, and have a good rest of the week and good weekend. Thank you very much.